Today we're talking about the Sony Power Zoom 18 to 200mm zoom lens. Now it's pretty compact when you think about other zoom lenses out there, but it's also very heavy. Or I'm very weak. I'm not too sure which one it is. Anyways, let's find out a little bit more about the lens, not about me being weak. No. So this is the little powerhouse we're talking about today. Now, I came upon this lens when a friend of mine was selling all of his Sony lenses and his cameras. He was switching over to Canon. He just got the Canon EOS R and he wanted to make the big switch from Sony to Canon. A lot of times it's the other way around. But anyways, I was fortunate to come upon this. He gave me a really good deal for this lens. At first I was pretty excited to get this lens. I got a great deal. Normally this retails, if you want to buy it now, for around $1,200 US or $1,500 Canadian. Depending on where you live, it might be a little bit different. But anyways, that's a pretty expensive lens. And I can get a whole bunch of different lenses for that price tag. But I got a good deal, so I was very happy. And I tried it out, but I didn't really love it at first. There was a couple things I didn't like about it. It was very heavy. Anyway, I was going to talk about some of the things I didn't like a little bit later on. So for the first month, this lens sat on my lens shelf, which is actually a shelf with maybe 2 lenses on it and maybe some goldfish crackers. That's kind of sad. So it sat there, not collecting dust. I had it in a lens bag. I take good care of my lenses. Now, I was coming on a project that I wanted to shoot some product B-roll. Normally I use other lenses for this, but I wasn't really happy with those results, so I tried something different. I got this bad boy out and I gave it a try. And I actually really liked the results. I'm not sure what it is about this. It has very good glass in the lens itself. It's actually a very good lens. It's a heavy, like I said, but it's a fantastic zoom, power zoom lens, and I used it for the product B-roll and I was really impressed. It gives you some kind of a contrasty vibe on your shots. I can't really explain it that well. I'm sure it has to do with the glass. The camera I was using was the FS5 and the Sony a6400. You know, both fairly good cameras, but not fantastic cameras for images. But I was really impressed with the product B-roll I got from this lens. Now, to go over the specs a bit from this lens, it's an APS-C lens for an APS-C camera. Again, I shoot on the Sony a6400, so this worked really well. I like to think that this is mainly used for a video lens. You can take fantastic photos with this, don't get me wrong, but the fact that this thing here has a power zoom and it has different options for you to make those zooms automatic when you just press the button and it goes. For me, as a videographer, I love having those options. You don't have to crank your zoom and worry about the speed and the consistency. Having that little option right there where you can go high, medium, low with your speeds and get a very consistent zoom in or zoom out, I think that's really great. And that's why I think it's mainly used for videographers, but of course, it takes great photos as well. Now, of course, I said this was an 18 to 200mm lens, but of course, if you put it on a APS-C camera, the crop factor comes in and you actually get a 27mm to 300mm equivalent, which if you think about it, that's pretty darn good for a lens like this. I mean, a tiny little lens being able to shoot 300mm, that's pretty decent if you ask me. And of course, if you use your clear zoom on your cameras, if they have that option, I mean, you're talking about ×2, so you can get up to 600mm on a little lens like this. Of course, it affects your quality a little bit, but if you're shooting outdoors, lots of light, lots of colors out there, I think it does a pretty decent job. I wouldn't want to use it at full 2 times with the clear zoom all the time, but every now and then it does a very good job, I think. And the fact that it can shoot 600 with the clear zoom is amazing with a tiny little lens like this. Now I want to talk about the autofocus. It's very good on this. This is an older lens and I'm using a newish camera and the autofocus works really well together. The a6400 has fantastic autofocus and it really works well on Sony lenses, and this is no different. This little bad boy, you pop this on, the autofocus really locks on and it gives you some great autofocus. Now, I don't use autofocus very much with this lens or any lens, but I love having that option and knowing that if I need to use it, I pop it on and it's gonna work, and that's what this will do. It'll work really well when it comes to autofocus. Now I mentioned earlier that this comes with a fantastic power zoom. It's powered through your camera, so you don't have to have any external power for this. But you can also switch it over to manual if you want. It has a little switch for manual or servo. Once you switch it to manual, it works just like any other lens, and you can switch that zoom to whatever length you'd like. It works really, really well. For me, I really like using the power zoom. I shoot mostly video, so that's why I have the power zoom. But it's great to know that the manual zoom works really, really well as well, because sometimes you just have to put it in manual to get the shots that you want. And sometimes you're rack focusing or doing something fun with your shot where you have to have complete control out of your zoom and your focus. Now I just mentioned focus. It has a tiny focus ring. I really wish it had a bigger focus ring on this. I know that's nitpicking. The Sigma lenses that I use have nice big, I mean they're prime lenses, so I get that, but they have a nice big focal ring where you can just turn that, grab it anywhere you want and turn it. This thing, you just gotta be more precise and make sure you grab it in the right spot. But hey, that's not a big deal. I'm being very, very picky. Other than that, it works really, really well and it's got a good feel to it. Now I mentioned earlier that I didn't love this lens to begin with. Like I said, it's heavy, it's kind of bulky, and one of the things that really frustrated me is this motor compartment back here. It sits like that with your camera here, so the lens is over here. Look how massive that thing is. I mean, that is pretty darn big if you take a look at it. I get why it's there. It does a great job. It controls the power zoom. It gives you that shot that you want, so I shouldn't be complaining. But it's really hard sometimes to use this. If you just attach your camera, like I would attach my A6400 or any smaller camera, this thing lands on the ground. When you put it down on a table or a desk or anything, it sits there. And of course, it's so big and it's rounded at the bottom. So what happens is that it rocks a little bit. It's just awkward. Nothing really bad happens with it, but it's just a little bit awkward. And for me, when I'm using a tripod with this, it's a pain in the butt. You have to make sure you rig up your camera to accommodate a lens like this. For me, when I have a Manfrotto plate on my tripod, I put it on the camera, put it on the tripod. The Manfrotto plate bangs up against this and it won't sit properly. So I have to rig something up where I have a couple risers to make it work. It's fine now, but at first it was a pain in the butt just to switch lenses. Now, I have a cage on my camera, which works really, really well, and that gets me past this problem of having to rig something up. The cage itself is a little bit higher, so when I put the plate on the cage and in the camera, everything works fine. But I don't always like having the cage on there. I don't like having the extra bulk sometimes with the cage. The idea of having a small form mirrorless camera is that I don't have to worry about a big rig setup. Some people like that, great, and I do use that in times, but most of the times if I'm running and gunning, I just want the camera, a lens, maybe a microphone, and let's go, let's just shoot this. But this thing here, you gotta think ahead. Now, there's been times where I'm shooting with my Sigma lenses, everything's working fine, I wanna switch over to this, but of course I need to rig it up in order for it to work. And for me, any little frustration, anything that's gonna slow me down, really starts to tick me off. I think it's a minor character flaw for myself. Actually, maybe it's a major character flaw. Anyways, it's my own fault. I just have to take a little bit of time to rig it up so it works. Now that I've been using it for a while, I'm used to it. I'm okay accommodating this lens and the big setup on it. And it works really, really well. And I'm really happy with the results. I just had to make this lens work for me. That's it. Okay, so far it's been a love fest with this lens. The Sony 18 to 200 power zoom. It's a love-in, isn't it? We're talking about all the good things. I talked about some of the bad things, but again, let's go over some of the cons with this lens. We said it's big and bulky. It's heavy, for sure. That is the case. Now, some people, when they're shooting at 18 mil, they notice a little bit of a distortion in their image. I don't notice it so much, but yeah, it's a little bit there. But I mean, once you crank it a little bit past 18, you kind of lose that, and I think that's pretty good. Now, it's not a very fast lens. The aperture on this is 3.5 to 6.3. Now, that's not fast, but it's okay for a zoom lens, and I think we just have to deal with that. Now, this also has OSS, or optical steady shot, in it. Now, that's fantastic because my A6400 does not have any kind of stability, but that's okay. This does, and it really does help. If you take a look at some of your image with this, especially with video, again, I don't really notice much with photos because I take mostly videos, but it really does help. It really does smooth out your shot. Now, it's not a miracle worker. It's not going to make your shots nice and smooth. I have a gimbal for that. I've actually tried this on the gimbal. It's a little heavy, but it worked really, really well. You can't zoom in too much because the zoom goes in and out and it affects your gimbal and affects your balance, which is a bit of a pain. But if you leave it at 18 mil, it does a pretty good job. It can almost keep it at 30 mil and it's perfect for me. It gives you lots of bokeh in the background and it works really, really well on my Ronin SC. And of course it would work on other gimbals because the Ronin SC is just a tiny one and the bigger gimbals will let you use a little bit heavier payload. Now another con with this is when you have this lens in manual zoom control. As you look, I hold it up. And what does it do? It retracts automatically. Yeah, some of them do that, and that's fine. But I find if I'm shooting something where I'm trying to get my shot down there, it will start to zoom in automatically because of the gravity. And vice versa, when I'm shooting something up, it'll start to go down. At first I was like, what is going on with this? I think there's just something wrong with the rings. There are workarounds for that. But it wasn't such a big deal for me because most of the times I use the power zoom. But it was really, really odd when you were getting a tight shot of something and you notice it was moving on you. You're like, what is going on? Hey? Yeah, I didn't like that at first. But the fact that I use power zoom now, I'm okay with that. And it's a little bit weird. You could work around it, but for me, I'm happy with it. And it's a con for sure, and I have to tell you about it. But otherwise, I think it's okay. Now, some people have had issues with the power zooms when you're zooming in and zooming out. Some people say that once you zoom out, there's a little bit of a bump in the shot if you're zooming back in. I've noticed it maybe a little bit, but for the most part, I don't do a lot of that. I don't do a lot of live zooming in and zooming back. For me, my shots, if I'm zooming in or anything like that, a lot of times I'm slowing it down, so I don't really need to see that end and back in a zoom. But if that's something that you're interested in, take a look at it. There are videos out there that go into a little bit deeper thought on that issue, but for me, it's not really a big thing. So at the end of the day, if you're looking for a good power zoom lens, I really can recommend the 18 to 200 mil. It's a very good lens and it's great for photos and even better for video. I don't think you'll be disappointed in it. I really like the compact design. The weight, we're dealing with it. My guns are getting bigger every time I use it, so that's just a side benefit, which is great. I really think if you do need a zoom lens, this could be a good option. I know there's a whole bunch of other options out there and other people like different Sony lenses, and that's fine. We all have our personal preferences. For me, I love having a couple prime lenses that I can get my main shots, but then when I need to get some close-ups or some other shots, especially some really nice B-roll, it's good to have a zoom lens, and this thing here does a great job. I can't explain it, but the colors on this are better than any other lens that I've used. And I've used some really, really expensive lenses, but for some reason, the colors and the contrast, just the look of it, I'm really, really happy with it, and I think you would be happy with it too. So if you're interested in this lens or have any questions, please feel free to comment in the comment section. I'm more than happy to talk about this lens because I really do like it, and that's really important when it comes to lenses. I think you really need to enjoy using those lenses to make your photos and your videography come to life, and this is the lens I really do enjoy. This channel is all about filmmaking tips and camera gear, so if you're into that kind of stuff, go ahead and subscribe. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. I'm Dave. This is Red Arrow Media. We'll see you next time. Seriously, can someone grab this? This is so heavy. My arms, look at me. Look, my veins are all sticking out.